listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. I've been super busy lately. I mean, it's always that end of year crunch to get all the client work kind of positioned. They often are looking for the strategies to prepare for budgeting going into next year. But I still found time to listen to a few of my favorite podcasts. And, I always like to give shout outs. So, I'm always talking about risky business. That's, number 2 after Identity at the Center, maybe. But the other one that I wanted to bring up, because maybe not a lot of folks have tuned in before, is the Kuppinger Cole Analyst podcast. And so the one I was listening to last night was episode 100. So congratulations to Matthias for achieving episode 100. But interestingly, that one was a perspective on everything is code. And so there are a couple tracks to the conversation, but the one that really resonated with me was a statement, and Martin was on that episode, and he said, infrastructure people are not developers, right? And it just brought me back to the days of, I used to be an infrastructure person myself. I didn't like this line, but a lot of folks would always say, I don't write code, right? But now the big theme is around automation, infrastructure as code, serverless, which usually requires some level of scripting. So I wonder how much of that is changing. But I do think, look, if infrastructure becomes code, it's just one more thing drawing on that limited pool of developer talent that's out there. And it's going to be harder and harder to find people who are qualified to do infrastructure if everything is code and scripts and things like that.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to find resources, but this is where the fun, I think, of the identity spaces is always changing. There's always something new, and try to keep up with it is always a challenge. I don't listen to as many podcasts. I listen to this one obviously, but I also listen to it like 4 times a week. 4 times per show because I'm editing it at least. Most of the podcasts I listen to are escapist, so trying to get away from work and things like that. But the risky business guys are good. Definitely, the Kuppinger Cole one is great. We've had John Tolbert on recently. I think we're actually going to have him on a couple times here within a pretty close proximity. And we've had Martin on it as well. So those are always kind of cool episodes. But I get it. I'm with you, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, but going back to, I guess one of the things that I found really interesting, or I started to think about, is, think of how much we've seen things shifting toward low code, no code. So even in that developer realm, I really think that this whole idea of infrastructure as code has got to be configuration checkbox buttons and push the code and then maybe edit it in the background. But, getting in there and pure scripting, that's usually outside of the expertise, but not only the expertise, but the area of interest for infrastructure-minded people.
I think that's nirvana. I think it would be great to have this low-code Lego type architecture. I just don't see it happening because, you and I, we talk with folks, all the time and learn about their business processes. And, sometimes their business processes are jacked up, man. Like they don't fit a particular, best practice or standard, and they're not even willing to change, right? I think that makes it really challenging to do a low code, no code config, whatever the right word is that you want to use. It makes it really challenging, for those types of folks. I think it makes a lot of sense if you think about like DevOps, right? Having kind of plug and play modules, that's where APIs come in, and you kind of like standard frameworks, right? For integration with apps. I'm more skeptical on the business side of things, just because I don't think business can change. But, I think this is a good conversation that we can have because, today we're going to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on what's it like to be a venture capital firm, in this space of identity. And to help us with that conversation, we've brought Mike Engle back. He is the head of strategic planning for One Cosmos. Welcome back to the show, Mike.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much. And then we've also introducing Howard Hall. He leads the North American office of Consult Hyperion. Welcome to the show, Howard.
Hey, thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Mike, you've been with us before. Maybe you can kind of just briefly recap your identity journey, and then we're going to go to Howard and ask him for his. But let's start there, just so we can kind of understand, what your guys' perspectives are and what your background is.
Yeah, sure. It's great to be back again, and I'm a regular listener, so really enjoy the work that you guys are doing here. As you mentioned, I'm head of strategic planning at One Cosmos and a managing partner in 1414 Ventures that we'll talk about here today. My journey started way back when I was 12 years old, got my first computer, but we won't go back that far. Most of my career has been in information security, and identity is one of the pillars of access and getting into systems. So it's always been near and dear to my heart. And then as this space has matured in the last 6 or 7 years, new technologies, cryptography, biometrics, right? Those all are enablers for identity. It's where I've really hung my hat and really been focusing on what I do every day. So that's how I got here today.
Howard, how about yourself?
Yeah, so similar to Mike, started out my career in cybersecurity and spent a fair bit of time there with some time spent in both payments and even data analytics. And as we started thinking about an investment thesis and where we wanted to spend our time, broadly speaking, a lot of those areas are the underpinnings for what was a few years ago, and I still think is, this new and emerging category of digital identity. So it just drew from, I think, our respective backgrounds and experiences and gave us a really interesting lens and an interesting point of view to hopefully make some good investments in this space, which I think we've done so far and will hopefully continue to do.
So is identity something that you chose, Howard, or did it choose you?
It's a really good question, Jeff. I think by and large it chose me. My initial attraction to, broadly speaking, the space came out of looking at the payments channel. And somebody much smarter than me, I would love to take credit for this, said, well, payments and identity are fundamentally two sides of the same coin. And as I started to think more about that and saw some of the activity in the payment space, which was a little bit overcrowded and a little bit overfunded, I saw a really interesting trajectory and growth opportunity in the digital identity space. And like Mike, sort of decided to really lean in and focus there.
And now here we are. You guys are representing 1414 Ventures as far as this conversation goes. For folks who are not familiar, what is 1414? I guess, Michael, why don't we start with you, and then Howard, if you want to add color.
Yeah, I'll start with, every organization needs a good genesis story, right? And 1414 refers to the Safe Conducts Act, which was passed by King Henry V in the year 1414. So that was basically the first form of accepted identification as you roamed about Europe. And so really the first form of identity. Now, of course, not digital identity back then. It was probably a big stone tablet that you carried around. But we decided to name the fund after that, really because of how much identity is now changing. And, whether COVID, enacted or not, but we're all thinking a little bit differently about identity online today.
Howard, is there anything that you want to add to kind of the explanation or the origin story for 1414?
Yeah, no, I think Mike summed up well, right? So the name is definitely indicative of identity from the beginning, and we want to be on the front of identity as it grows and sort of the future version of it. So I think the name is very much indicative of that for sure. I think also, identity is a fairly amorphous topic and touches a lot of different, businesses and business processes. And so it gave us the opportunity to have a very binary thesis, like really focus in on digital identity, but a wide enough aperture that avails us to look at opportunities in ad tech and martech and privacy, in proofing. And so it kind of serves, two fundamental purposes, being really sort of focused in where we want to invest, but giving us a breadth of opportunity that allows us to look at multiple companies that are sort of broadly solving this digital identity conundrum that we're finding ourselves in.
Hey, Mike, I'm wondering, what I've got in mind here is some kind of bell curve, if you will. So on the left tail of the bell curve would be, new spaces, something like Keem or identity verification, some of the things that are like really emerging, but don't have a huge market presence at this point. Kind of in the fat part of the bell curve would be IGA, single sign-on, things like that. And obviously, who cares about the right tail of the curve, right? Those are the things that are no longer relevant. But I'm trying to figure out, what are some of the things that are on that left tail of the curve for you? And maybe that's a leading question, because I'm assuming that that's kind of where you guys look to invest, or is it you're looking at everywhere on the bell curve and it has more to do with the company?
No, yeah, it is. So you're right. On the right side, you have single sign-on, right? We've been doing that for forever and different flavors along the way over the years. But on the left side, there are a bunch of emerging identity concepts that, despite only being a few years old, are getting tremendous traction. So an example would be what's referred to as self-sovereign identity, which gets bucketed together with decentralized identity, or bring your own identity, as Gartner calls it. And the idea there is you actually own, manage, and control your identity. Now, of course, it still gets kind of given to you, like your driver's license and passport do, but then you really hold that in your possession and then can leverage it, and it can't be taken away from you. Think about if you trust login with Google for everything in your life, and then one day Google gets a bug up their butt and misflags your account as, I don't know, suspicious, and they cut you off. Imagine what that would do to your, quote, identity at that point. Your pictures are gone, photos, your email, everything. And I've heard that happening to people. And so these tech giants today control the identity, and self-sovereign and decentralized identity are these new frameworks, standards-based out of organizations like the W3C, that allow the enablement and safe sharing of identity managed by the end user. So that's one example. I'd say another is in privacy and consent. So privacy is the redheaded stepchild of identity. Every big organization is like, oh my God, I got to deal with privacy. Just give me all the data. I want to sell it and monetize it. But now with GDPR, CCPA, and all these downstream, even like individual states are enacting their own privacy laws. Now there's a whole industry that's popping up on how you manage that consent, not just clicking a cookie. Yes, I clicked a cookie, but actually, what data do you have on me? How did you ask me for consent? Am I allowed to share it? Do I have to ask the user back for permission? Can I revoke that consent down the line? There's a whole industry waiting to be, unleashed right there, as another example.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of the interesting technologies. Passwordless is one that's blistering hot. I mentioned another one, which was Ciem, CIEM, which is I was reading a Gartner article where they estimated somewhere between 1% to 5% of the addressable marketplace has actually adopted the technology. So in other words, the amount of growth possible, untapped market, is humongous. Will it ever tap that market, though? That's kind of the risk. Whereas maybe you look at like IGA and it's probably flip-flop, like 95% of the addressable market has already picked a product. However, potentially somebody's built a better mousetrap, right? So I'm thinking, I'm asking you as like an investor, and I'd like to hear Howard's feedback too, is like, are there still times where you might want to be in that middle of the bell curve, but mostly because, some companies very innovative, or they've come out with a way to have a better cost structure, things like that? Or is it, you want to be on that bleeding edge of technology?
Yeah, no, Jim, I think you bring an interesting point to bear. When I think about the digital identity space, and particularly the vendors within that space, going all the way back to single sign-on and now, identity access management and some of the more mature solutions, they've grown up to be platforms. But at the end of the day, you need to have a holistic solution that integrates across your organization, particularly outward bound, which is now kind of where the emerging growth is seen come from in the science space and the customer-facing space. So I think you really need to understand the whole curve, because there are going to be more mature companies that are going to be ripe for consolidation. We've already seen some consolidation within the space. I think we're going to continue to see ongoing consolidation. And again, because the digital identity, broadly speaking, topic is so wide-reaching, it becomes, a security conversation. It becomes an enabling conversation. Digital identity, to me, implemented the right way, really achieves two things. It provides a higher degree of security and authentication, and sort of, just goodwill with the transacting parties. But two, it reduces friction when implemented the right way, and that it has the ability to grow top line revenues. And that's why I think you see, entrants in the ad tech martech space really leaning into the digital identity capabilities, because shopping cart abandonment is still, in an e-commerce world, still the number one cost prohibitor, or I should say revenue prohibitor, and often that is just as simple as somebody's inability to prove who they say they are, or inability to put forth a payment credential. And so I think you need to be able, for us, and given the size of our fund and where we're focused, we kind of want to be on that bleeding edge. We want to be in what we think of as the pre-seed investors. We typically like to be the first money in, and potentially even the only institutional money in. But having said that, I think it's within our requirements and within our responsibility to sort of more holistically be able to evaluate the entire landscape. And there are going to be opportunities, and we've already done one that sort of fell outside of our traditional investment thesis, but we thought the opportunity was so good and the problem that they were solving was so imminent that we decided to invest in. Ironically enough, that's the one that's transacted and has created our first liquidity opportunity.
I think it's really important what you guys do. You provide an opportunity for funding for the identity and access management space for these new companies that are, just starting up. So somebody has a great idea and they're starting to put pen to paper, and now they get to the point where it's like, we need capital in order to grow this thing, and you guys are serving that purpose. Mike, I wanted to point to one thing I saw on your website, which I just thought was super interesting, and maybe you could talk about it. It's like a periodic table of elements for the identity and access management space. I'm wondering, how did you guys come up with that, and kind of, are you adding new elements, taking elements off? I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah, for anybody who wants to see it, it's at 1414ventures.com, right on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit and click on it, and it turns into an interactive chart where, for example, just the first one in the top left corner is IAM, right? Very broad, category, and it'll show you that we've got a $13.6 billion market right there with a CAGR of 12.7%, and the source is there too. So a lot of times when you're dealing with partners or whatever, and they want to know, hey, what's the market opportunity here? This is one way, obviously not the only source, but a nice consolidated list. And there's some really nuanced concepts in there, like biometrics is its own thing in there, identity proofing its own thing, adaptive authentication. So we spent a lot of time baking this early on in our company's history, and we haven't gone back to it. It's pretty comprehensive. But I imagine every year we would take a look and say, all right, what has changed in identity? And we might add a new element here or there as something new comes out, right? Because the crystal ball is a little fuzzy on what new identity technology might come out in 2022, for example.
I love the periodic table because I think it's handy for people to really kind of, there's a couple things, right? So I think I'm going to point people towards this because there's so many things in the identity space it's sometimes kind of tough to keep up with. Okay, what is this thing and where does it fit in the landscape? And it makes me wonder what has already been solved. What are products or solutions that we don't need more of them, right? So if this is an idea that maybe someone has out there, it's like, yeah, it's been solved. You might want to think about a different approach to it. Again, unless you've built a better mousetrap somehow. But what's saturated at this point?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, things like password managers, right? There's a couple really big ones out there, and even the antivirus companies have bundled it into their AV at this point. So I don't think we need another password manager. But that being said, even for things that are saturated, there's ways to combine technologies together and do them right. So take, for example, one of the investments that we made was a startup called Singular Key. And they had an orchestration product that combines identity proofing. So how do you remotely proof who somebody is through document scanning, et cetera, with all kinds of authentication options. Let's combine that with Authenticate with Google and Facebook or other third-party sources. Strengthen the identity, tap into your Experians and TransUnions and Equifaxes and so forth, and present that, package that all up. You mentioned low code and no code in the beginning with a drag and drop function. And that idea was so novel, but it's touching all these different disciplines. They put it together in a way nobody else had, so much so that Ping snapped them up pretty early in their process, in their life cycle. And, Ping, established company, they do single sign-on very well. They saw how taking these other discrete, kind of nuanced functions and putting them together would have some value. So Howard, I don't know if you want to, talk about maybe a different discipline, single sign-on as an example or something.
Yeah, no, I think to the point that both Jim and Jeff pointed out, there are some very mature companies in the space. When we think about them, certainly, identity access management, even privilege access management, some of the PAM guys, authentication, but you're still seeing a growth trajectory. And I don't want to pick on any specific companies. I'll pick one more of a category. When you think about sort of the document verification space, right? I mean, I don't think any of us saw the recent announcement by Socure of $450 million in funding on a $4.5 billion valuation. That was pretty staggering. But they're not unique there. There are other companies that they compete against that are having maybe not similar growth or certainly valuations, but still have achieved or are achieving that unicorn status. So I think there's going to be lots of opportunity for more than a couple of entrants in any given space. And to the point Mike brings up, without beating the drum too loudly, that's part of the reason we really like Singular Key, because often a lot of these companies have been implemented as point solutions, have become platforms, and now these platforms all need to start speaking to one another. And if you're an enterprise with an enterprise, often team of people, you can manage those types of multiple platforms and multiple applications. What we really do at Singular Key is it sort of give that single orchestration pane of glass, enabled a very efficient deployment of multiple technologies, and was really targeted at the mid market. And I think in many ways, a lot of the growth is going to come out of the mid market because digital identity is very dynamic, not only from customer demands and enterprise requirements, but also from the winds of change. And those winds of change are coming in the form of regulation and compliance. And so it's still a bit of a moving target, which as an investor is a good thing because we think it's going to create opportunity.
So speaking of investing, I think, Howard, earlier, Jim mentioned kind of the bell curve, and I think Mike referenced kind of like looking at that, the earlier stages for products. But I guess, Howard, how do you decide, what to invest in? How do you find companies in this space? Is it, shaking LinkedIn networks and finding products that way and people who might be interested? Is there, a subreddit for, looking for investors or something like that? Or, is it roaming conference halls and finding technologies that might be interesting and maybe, don't have a very big booth or a booth at all? How do you find and kind of source and figure out, hey, let's take a look at these guys and maybe we invest in them?
So great question, Jeff. So yes to all of the above, right? So we do all of those things and we'll continue to. I will say our most interesting investment opportunities and the ones that we've invested on, and this has just been a lot of good fortune, has come as a result of our personal networks. We're a pretty mature team, which is a really nice way of saying we're old, right? So, but this is very much a passion project and a labor of love as much as anything. And as a result of that, I've never done the math on this, but and we should probably talk about the team backgrounds because we bring different points of view, which I think is really unique. We have somebody who was a C-level executive at consumer companies like TIA, CREF, and Fidelity. As you know, Mike has held C-level roles at large enterprises like Lehman Brothers. My background comes out of the startup world, and even I've spent a number of years angel investing. We have a traditional venture capitalist, and finally, one of our last partner has a very deep pedigree in technology, having run the cybersecurity business at places like IBM and was the chief architect on Watson. So really different disciplines and points of view and experiences that give us a really interesting lens, but with all that experience come relationships. And so we've been able to really engender ourselves into the space for two reasons. One is we have some deep relationships and we've established some credibility. And two, to build on the point Mike made earlier, we're the only fund that we're aware of that's solely focused on the digital identity space, particularly at this stage. And when I say this stage, we typically write checks orders of hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions. So our typical first check we write is about $250,000. And why that's interesting is because there's no such thing, and you guys are a little younger than I am, but there's no such thing. I remember when a seed round was like $1 million. Now seed rounds are 8 to 10 million. Funds have gotten so bloated, and there's so much liquidity in the market. It's not efficient for $100 million fund to write a check for 250 grand. It's just not efficient. It's not a good use of their capital or their time. So it's created a really interesting void in the market where we're seeing a lot of inbound activity. And as a result of that, have the lens through the variety of diversity of our experiences to really vet some of these opportunities and come up with what we think are some pretty good companies that we've decided to make some bets on.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, the team here is a combination of tech investing, like Howard mentioned. We also have a bunch of partners and advisors that are just all over the industry, and have also sent deals our way and help us with diligence. I know one of your other attendees on the podcast is Eve Mahler, the CTO of ForgeRock, is one of our advisors, and she knows identity, right? She's been there defining the standards since they were first created. So some folks like that help us with deal flow as well. And we'll continue to see more of that coming our way.
Yeah, she definitely knows her stuff. She's been on the show a couple times. I'm curious, what does the due diligence process look like? So if I've got, a product I want to pitch, and I'm a founder, or in some position where I'm trying to get seed money, what should I be prepared to discuss as part of that due diligence process?
Yeah, there's the basics that any VC would look into, right? It's for, we first, when we source a deal, we do some high level diligence. Do we get it? We've had traditional cybersecurity companies come to us that just don't have an identity element, and we're sticking true to our thesis around that. So we would pass pretty early on. And then early in the screening process, we look for a team, right? The team is the most important thing at this stage, because sometimes we'll run across people that haven't even made the MVP yet. So they have a PowerPoint slide, maybe some videos of what it's going to do, and that can be enough to get funded. But then you have to also believe in the product market fit and some concept of go to market, right? Are they going to be able to pull it off, or partner and hire with the people that'll help them get to market? So that product, people, market fit is something we check out very early. And so we'll have one of kind of typical sponsor of the kind of core team members do a lot of the early legwork and meet with the team. And then if we get past that, we'll start to introduce them to our other team members and advisors and vet it a little further. So now you're starting to spend some more significant time, both our time and the company's time. So we try to make the decisions as quickly as possible. And there's not a ton of diligence that goes into product just because of that pre-seed stage that we're in. Howard, do you want to dive into that anymore?
No, you stated it nicely, Mike. I mean, for us, I think a big part of the calculus in making the right decision is getting to know the entrepreneurs and also knowing where we can help them. Like we talked about, there's a lot of liquidity in the market. Cash is almost a commodity at this point, and so we want to bring more to bear than just a few $100,000, right? We want to be able to bring a network, some experience, some expertise, and we don't really want to get into governance, so we don't even often require board seats, but we do want to be the partner in every sense of the word, both financially and from a business strategy standpoint to help grow their business. But I think you really ticked all the main things, Mike.
I'd like to tease on this one a little bit, and maybe Howard, you can kind of take us through, because I think Singular Key is probably the best example I can think of. But I'm curious, from a process perspective of, finding it in the first place, deciding whether you want to invest it, and then, that this guiding process that you guys have been talking about recently here about, kind of helping shape where things maybe go or influencing, the product. And then ultimately, the decision to either exit, right, by getting acquired or whatever it might be. Is that something you can kind of take us through? And I'm picking on Singular Key just because I know that's something you guys have invested in and have now exited out of. That might be helpful to kind of put it in context as a step-by-step for folks who are listening to help understand the process.
No, great question, Jeff. And I can take you through a high level. I'll invite Mike to jump in if he wants to add some color as well. So Singular Key, like I said earlier, came through a personal relationship. We got to spend some time with Jordan, their CEO and founder or co-founder, along with Hitesh, and they're just impressive gentlemen. They've been there, done that. They had a basis of experience building and scaling and selling companies in prior opportunities, and we kind of saw the fit right away. So the people box was pretty obvious pretty quickly, again, because we had a long-standing personal relationship. But as the team got some exposure to them, I think we all had an inordinate amount of comfort that these guys are very capable entrepreneurs and very capable of executing. We really leaned in on the market, trying to understand who the adopter of the Nebulius product was going to be. And in doing so, like to think we made some helpful introductions for them. A number of those introductions have matured into customer opportunities. And without saying too much, one of them matured into something even much more strategic. And I'd like to think we helped to support that introduction that quite frankly led to a fairly lucrative and successful outcome for them. So, we once the real work starts for us as a team once we've made the investment. There's quite a bit of work that goes up to getting to the point that like, we believe in this company, we want to support them, but the real work starts after that, and it ranges everything from rolling up our sleeves and literally writing a press release for Singular Key in particular on a Saturday morning, all the way through helping to support their sales strategy, and inevitably, collaborating with them as they began to start fielding and soliciting potential offers to be acquired. So we just want to be that counsel, that coach, that team member that they can rely on long after that we made the investment. The investment to us is the sort of Trojan horse to really help them build their company and build their value. Mike, feel free to weigh in or add any color that might be helpful.
No, that's it. The companies that come to us, some of them have come to us when they've almost closed their round and said, would you guys please get in? We'll make a little more room for you. Because of what Howard just said, they know the extensive networks that we have and can help them grow to that next stage of either funding or growing the business. So that's been really cool to kind of be involved in and work with these organizations, because I'm it's the startup world is near and dear to my heart. So I love helping see the success and helping in that.
Mike, I'm picturing Shark Tank. You go in there and you're buying a part of the company, and you're also providing some kind of help, right? I know this industry, and I can maybe hook you up with some people who can become clients. When you watch that show, do you think, boy, this is science fiction, or is this something that has some basis of truth?
Yeah, nobody calls me Mr. Wonderful, but and I doubt they ever will. But no, I mean, the things that they do on Shark Tank are things that every VC has to do. It's ask the hard questions about product cost and market fit and competition and all those things. It's just not quite as glitzy. I'd love, it'd be awesome if we could have a half hour and get to the point where, for $1, we'll take 100% of your company like they do on there. But it's not quite that glamorous, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. But, I mean, what I've been thinking about is the exit strategy. And I'm wondering if the exit strategy is always the same. Like, hey, let's get the company, help the company, get over a couple of hurdles and then, sell our stake. Or is there sometimes where you think like, hey, there's a company we invest in and we could be in this thing for the next 10, 20 years. Take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start. If you see somebody who's got the right product and team and they've got momentum, we would encourage them and try to guide them to the point of future fundraises, right? Getting what they call the triple, double of growth, 3x in your first year, 3x your second year. Those are the types of things that get you unicorn status down the road. And sometimes there's a path to, a longer term play, but market pressures or timing being everything, sometimes it's better to exit and you kind of work that out as you go. A $300,000 investment in Coinbase 8 years ago would have been worth $2.4 billion today, right? So you want to have that right combination of sticking with it and knowing know when to hold them, know when to fold them, kind of thing, right?
I've got all my money in Squid Game coins, so I think I'm okay, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, I'm also wondering, like, do you ever see that one where you're like, oh, this could be the next WhatsApp? I mean, I remember I barely knew what WhatsApp was when Facebook paid $3 billion for it.
26 billion. Yeah, no, that was crazy. I think 3 billion was the Instagram. Yeah, and did they make some great acquisitions, right? Yeah, no, Howard has actually been through some more growth stories in his early career. I mean, he had a company, I think, go public. So maybe you want to touch on that, Howard.
Yeah, no, I'd certainly be happy to touch on it. So really, really good question, Jim. I think I worked at a venture capital firm many, many years ago as a EIR, so I wasn't an investment partner. I didn't have, I made coffee and picked up lunch and helped out some entrepreneurs. It was not a terribly glamorous job, but I remember there's a very, successful investor in Boston named Bob Davoli, who runs a firm called Sigma, and that's where I spent some time. And I remember him saying to me, and this predates the name unicorn, right? There was no such thing as unicorns, but I remember him saying to me, every company that walks through that door, you need to believe is going to be $1 billion exit or an IPO. And I probably adopted some of that thinking. So to answer your question, Jim, we're betting early stage, so high risk, so you need to have that lever of high reward. And, I think we'll hit some singles and doubles, which I think we'll be perfectly happy to hit in terms of some of the exits. But we have, a real high belief system that some of the investments we made have the ability to be really meaningful companies that transact at really meaningful dollars and can create, shareholder value and credibility for us as new investors into the market. So, there will be, occasionally there will be some swinging for the fences. And I think that's a healthy thing for a fund of our size and the stage we're investing.
So I really have appreciated the discussion. I think this is really it's helped me a lot. I think understand, how it goes. And I'm glad Jim asked the Shark Tank question because, I think we all like to glamorize it. And maybe this is a show idea. I'm just kind of spitballing here, Jim. Maybe it's, we have some vendors who come on and are looking for seed money, come on and pitch, and maybe we give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something like that. And I could see that being kind of interesting.
Sounds like American Idol too, and I can be like Simon Cowell.
Yeah, exactly. America's next digital identity idol. How about that? Let's go ahead and bring it back up because I want to wrap up here in a little bit because Mike and Howard have been so great with their time. I want to pivot to something that is totally not identity related and get an answer from both of them, actually from everybody. Since we're coming up here on the Christmas holiday, at least in the US, what I want to know is, and we'll start with Howard and then we'll go to Mike, is what is the best Christmas present you have ever received?
Oh, man, I love that question. And it didn't take me long to think of it, right? We all have that one sort of special Christmas that sticks out in our head. And for me, I don't remember if I was 7 or 8 or 9, but it was 40 plus years ago. I can assure you of that. And you guys may be old enough to remember the banana seat on the Schwinn bicycle. So I got a bright green Schwinn bicycle with all the bells and whistles, right? Literally the bell and the whistle with the strings or the streamers hanging off the side. And I can remember leaping down. We were spending that Christmas with my grandparents, leaping down their stairs. Couldn't be more excited for that Santa Claus had come the night before, and just kissing the bike, literally kissing it, and it was snow on the grass, okay, and trying to drive it around with the training wheels maybe around their dining room table. So that evokes some special memories. So I'm gonna hand it back to you, Jim, and you ask who else has a special memory like that.
Mike, you go ahead. Let's hear it. Howard, I love that. I think of were you in a climate where you could actually get out and actually ride your bike?
Regrettably, no. The spring, the snow didn't thaw for a few months, but I rode it up and down wherever I could, driveways, dining rooms, wherever they let me.
Michael, how about yourself?
Yeah, it was December 25th, 1983. The Tandy Color Computer 2 came out. That just, you could probably figure out my age by looking at my LinkedIn, but I'm pretty old. So my parents got me that, and that changed my life. I there wasn't much you could do with it back then. It came with a book on BASIC. I don't think it had any storage. I had to go buy a tape drive after that. But, there wasn't a lot to do back then, right? We didn't have the interweb and InstaChats and all these other things that we have today. So I spent so much time on that thing that it changed my life and put me on a path of, first the dark side, hacking into CompuServe and phone cards and doing bad things. And then I turned into the white hat and got in the InfoSec world. That was that. And I mean, later in life, when I had kids, the best gift now is the ones that the kids make for me, right? So I have one particular in mind. I can't say which because then the kids will think I have a favorite, but they made this really cool thing, and like just the amount of effort that went into it, and it's like this is my favorite little thing now. So 2 different eras, 2 different thoughts.
That's very cool. Jim, how about you?
Well, and of course, Mike's kids listen to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm glad to hear about that. But seriously, yeah, my favorite one was around the same age that Howard mentioned, and I got a G.I. Joe battleship. And it wasn't a battleship. It was one of the ships where you have the airplanes, the aircraft carriers. And I mean, this thing was massive. It took up most of my bedroom after it was all assembled, but I think it was $100 in, $1985. So that was a pretty big, expensive toy. I had a bunch of the figures and everything, and I played with that thing for so long. The thing was, if I had left it in the box, I could probably sell it now and buy a house with that money. But still, I had so much fun, and it was like immediately when you asked that question, that's what came to mind. What about you, Jeff?
So to kind of peel back the curtain here a little bit, I told everyone on the show what the question was going to be just before we hit record. So they've had a little bit of time to think up. And, we didn't coordinate answers, but Jim, I'm on G.I. Joe too as well. So mine is the G.I. Joe hovercraft, which I don't remember what year it was. It must have been mid 80s at some point at that point. But I just remember being like, I really hope I get the hovercraft for Christmas and blah, blah, blah. And then it finally came and it had the little depth charges on the side that you could, flip the switch and would fall off. And they had a little I don't know what it was called, a little personal speeder craft that shot out the front of it. And this thing was awesome. Right. And that was, I still think about this day, obviously that is still, fresh in my mind. I remember, hoping and dreaming and wishing for it. And then it actually came true on Christmas. It's tough to beat that, especially as kind of a childhood memory. But yeah, we didn't coordinate at all on the G.I. Joe stuff, but I guess I'm not surprised at this point.
Yeah, you'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I think we've spent enough time, with you guys, and I appreciate it. I want to pass it around for just kind of final thoughts. Howard, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts, any words of wisdoms for people who are, in this identity space and looking to kind of get funded or help for them?
Yeah, no. So I'll take the opportunity to provide a shameless plug. If you have a good idea and you're looking for money, we'd love to talk to you. So shameless plug acknowledged. And then I'd just like to thank you guys for, number one, inviting me on. And I know Mike's been on before. It was really just an honor and a pleasure. And number two, and even more importantly, for doing such a great service to this sector, right? There's not a lot of content or a lot of, these types of interactions that take place in this type of form. I think we all just get really well informed. In anticipation of today, I've really gotten quite fond of listening to some of your past podcasts, and I have a whole bunch more I'm excited to listen to. So first and foremost, thanks to you guys as much as anything. It was a real honor and a pleasure to be a part of today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Howard. Flattery will get you everywhere in this show. No pressure, Mike, but what about yourself? Final thoughts?
Yeah, no, there's really no idea that's too crazy. We've seen some things that just you have to scratch your head. And if you think back, the mouse was a foreign concept back when I got my Tandy Color computer, and then the IBM came out, and we had to teach the whole world how to use a mouse. And I remember trying to teach my dad when I got him a computer, and so now it's second nature. The same thing is going to happen in identity. There's things we haven't even thought of that make your identity usable, harder to steal, privacy preserving, all that stuff. So the craziest of ideas will turn into billion-dollar ideas in a very short period of time. So looking forward to any entrepreneur, coming our way with a discussion about anything.
Yeah, very cool. We'll have a link to 1414ventures.com in our show notes. But yeah, I think of the mouse, and I think was it Microsoft Solitaire was designed to be how to learn how to use a mouse for the mass public who weren't familiar with it. Yeah. Jim, final thoughts for this week?
Yeah, well, I don't think I've shared this on the show before, but being that it's this idea that's been in my head, I'm going to throw it out there because anybody who would build this could really make being in the IAM strategy development much better, which is, okay, I think when it comes to customer IAM, right, hot space, there are a lot of solutions out there that are focused on the authentication side of the house. I think one missing element, something that has not been addressed, and if there's anybody out there who knows of a solution that does address this, come on the show. We'd love to have you. But it's delegated administration. It's for organizations, companies that have a dealer network or a franchise network, and it's hierarchically driven, and administration is based on that hierarchy. It's just so many organizations have to just build their own custom solution to manage through that problem. And when we talk about dealerships, I mean, this is not a very small niche market. Or when we talk about franchisee networks, not a small niche market, but, imagine a large fast food chain that has a franchisee network. They could have individual restaurants that owners that have one or two restaurants, or they could have a franchise owner that owns 100 restaurants, right? And they have some hierarchy and district managers and people that they want to segment administration to. So that's my idea. I'm not going to develop the product because I'm not a developer, like we started off this conversation. But if anybody else wants to develop it, I know some guys who invest in companies that do stuff like that.
You're a thinker, Jim, a deep thinker.
I like to think. I like to call it an idea guy.
You're right. Yeah. Right. Just the idea guy. I think that's a good spot that we can call it for this week. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Howard, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have links to both of those guys in our show notes for people to check them out. Visit 1414ventures.com. I'm sure there's some good information that you guys can have there, especially that periodic table. That's a good one there. And with that, we're going to go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
Thanks, Jim and Jeff.
Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.